Good evening. Good evening from Blue Denim Press. My name is Shane Joseph, and I'm the publisher of Blue Denim Press. And I'd like to welcome you to the virtual launch of Sharon A Crawford's memoir of growing up in Toronto in the 1950s and 60s, memoir titled The Enemies Within Us. Just a couple of words about Blue Denim Press. We're a small press based in Ontario, and we've been publishing for the last 10 years. We specialize in fiction, short stories, and novels. But in recent times, we found that memoirs have become quite popular. And so to celebrate that theme, we have a memoir today, and it's Sharon's book. Sharon's been published with us before. She's published 3 books with us before. And now we're going to be doing her 4th, which is the memoir. So a few housekeeping items just before we get going. We are live, and so sometimes if the internet connections are not very strong, you might find the screen freezing. Just refresh your Facebook page and you should be okay. I hope that doesn't happen. It's never happened to us before, but there's always the first time. Please leave your questions for Sharon in the comments section, because we like comments. We don't know who you are out there, so we can only find that out by reading your comments and reading your names in the comments. And so if you leave a comment, we'll try to answer them, and we'll feed them to Sharon during the Q&A session. And then we'll draw at the end of it for some free copies of the book. So that's something worth waiting for. The show is going to be recorded, and it'll be posted on YouTube as well later. So if you lose the connection for some strange reason, you can always pick it up on YouTube later. There's also a special announcement to be made about where to purchase this book. There's a special on the book right now, and we will be giving you that information in due course. So I'm seeing a few people joining the feed right now, so I think I'll just wait maybe a minute to give everybody to get on. The times sometimes vary. My computer says 6:58. My smartphone says 7:02, and Zoom says something else. So I'll just give it a minute, and when everybody's on, we'll get going. Thank you. Okay, I think we should get going. So our agenda for today is basically I'm going to introduce you to Sharon. Sharon's going to read us from her book, and then I'm going to interview Sharon, because I published this book and I worked with Sharon on this book for quite a number of years, and I still have some questions for her. So I'm going to do that, and then if there are questions from you, which I hope you would post for us on the comment section, we'll ask them of Sharon, and she'll try to answer them for you. And then Sharon's going to read again from her selection, and then we'll have some prize draws and give you some information about where the book can be purchased, just so that I don't forget, because this happens to me all the time. The book is on special right now from the Danforth Book City, which is located at 348 Danforth Avenue, just west of Chester, and on the north side of Danforth. It is part of the Carrot Common. The book's on special from the 25th of November to the 29th of November. And I know that there's a lockdown in Toronto right now, but you can order the book by phone, and there's curbside pickup for the book It's selling for $20. The retail price is normally 24. So I hope you will support Sharon and purchase the book and help her out at this time. I also have the book on special with Kobo and with Kindle. It's selling on Kindle for $2.99 US and on Kobo for $2.99 Canadian. So that's available for the next 5 days as well. So those are some of the deals out there. Okay, so with that, I'm going to introduce you to Sharon. Now, Sharon Crawford, Sharon A Crawford, that's how she writes herself in as a writer, is a former journalist and writes the Beyond Mystery series and hosts the TV show Crime Beat Confidential on thatchannel.com. She teaches fiction and memoir writing and belongs to the Crime Writers of Canada, Sisters in Crime, the Toronto Heliconian Club, and runs the East End Writers Group. Her interests include gardening, walking, reading, research, and photography. You can visit her website at www.samcraw.com. And with that, let's have Sharon. Go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you, Shane. Hello, everybody. Glad you could make it. I don't know what it's doing out your way, but I think we're supposed to get some more snow and mixed with rain later on, but we're nice and cozy in our little places, and to cozy alone and together, I guess. Now, this is a copy of this Enemies Within Us memoir. This is what the cover looks like, and I'll get my face out of the way. And it's Shane designed it, I'll have to tell you that. And it's got a picture of the house I grew up in, my parents when they were much younger and before I was born, and me when I'm 8 years old. And the only reason I know that I'm 8 years old then is the hair was still blonde. It's a trait on my mother's side, except she had black hair. You start out blonde and turn out with brown hair later on. And so I'm going to read a short excerpt at the beginning of The Enemies Within Us. I'm going to read from the book, and I'm not. And what I mean by that is, with bad eyes, you have to print stuff out in large and read from that. So that's what I'm going to read from. So this is the beginning of The Enemies Within Us. Prelude. There are nights when the wolves are silent and only the moon howls. U.S. comedian and actor, the late George Carlin. The wind whistles around me like an invisible avenger swooping down in the dark night. On this cold, dry evening in early November 1957, I am squeezing Mommy's hand as we scurry home from Brownies along Lesmond Avenue in East End, Toronto. I try to look straight ahead, but I can't help glancing to the left. The driveways are filled with murky shadows, looming into human shapes that seem to leap towards me. I dig my nails into Mommy's hand. A streetlight pops like a camera flash, catching a maple tree shuddering, its winter branches stripped bare from its shield of summer leaves. I want to run home. I want to be home. My Mommy continues steering me in a steady, brisk walk. Mommy and Daddy are supposed to guarantee my security, and our home is supposed to provide me sanctuary, but they are elderly parents. They do, in their own ways, try to help me, their only child. But interior and exterior demons keep getting in the way. Demons like that knock on the front door in the middle of the night. Chapter 1, A Home is Not a House. You Can't Go Home Again, Thomas Wolfe. One late night, loud pounding on the front door wakes Mom, Daddy, and me. Like the servant heeding the master, we all strip out to the front entrance. Mom turns on the veranda light and yanks the door open. Do you know this man? A police officer stands on a veranda. His right hand supports the shoulder of a disheveled man. Home, the man says. The stench of his breath assaults my nostrils and I jump back behind Mom, then peek out. The man's oily black hair lies flat. Night shadow and red blotches compete for attention on his face. He is bare from his neck to his dark trousers. Looking closer, I see blood dribbling down from a steep slice on his left cheek onto his chest. His eyes look bloodshot and vague. A black lump swells above his left eye. Home, he asks again. Sharon, go back to bed, Daddy says. Fascinated and repulsed, I lean out a little further. Who is this man? Oh, dear Lord, says my mother. It's Mr. Vargo from 2 doors down the street. Not from here. Our house is safe. Our house will protect us from harm. But can its bricks and mortar stop evil from hovering within? Maybe we should have taken the knock on the door as a warning. Our home, number 139, a World War II built bungalow, was located on a short road which ended at a cul-de-sac in Toronto's East End. That location should have nailed it as a big security blender or blanket, but appearances can tell lies. I was a scaredy cat hiding behind mommy's words and daddy's protection. Daddy could do no wrong. However, daddy had one dirty little habit. He smoked. He smoked in the house, day and night, inside and outside the house, and probably at work. He had a ritual of making his own cigarettes in the basement where mother banished him. So, in the wisdom of my 7 years, I sneak downstairs and pretend to play with Patsy and Darlene, my doll family, just to watch the ritual. At the back of the unfinished basement, Daddy sits at his workbench just outside Mom's root cellar door. I drop Patsy and Darlene into their doll carriage, tiptoe towards Daddy, and peer over his shoulder. He turns around and smiles. Come here, Sharon. Want to see how it's done? I sit beside him and watch. Hunched over his workbench, he resembles a shoemaker with all the materials of his trade spread out before him. Except he works with tobacco, not leather, and the faint smell of fresh, unlit tobacco loiters in the vicinity of the workbench. Daddy separates the wafers of white paper, placing one flat on the workbench. He reaches for an open tin of tobacco and with his thumb and index finger pinches a wad and sets it on the paper. He smooths it out almost to the edge and pushes it again until it resembles a thin line of dry roughage. With deliberate care, he picks up the paper's edge and starts rolling it with the tobacco inside. When he finishes, he licks one side. It is a cigarette. I think it is magic. Would you like to try rolling one, he asked me. Nodding, I dig in, thick, clumsy kid fingers, pushing fiber into the fine paper. My cigarettes will give you cancer just from looking at them. But I do more. I am helping my father make his own death. Of course, we don't know any better then. The ritual of father and daughter rolling cigarettes brings me closer to him and gives me comfort.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good one, Sharon. When you read it, it's so different from when I read it, in print form, and it's more dramatic the way you read it. So thank you very much for that. So I have a few questions for you now. Hope you can answer them for me and for readers. Now I know all about you as a writer. You've published. This is your 4th book with Blue Denim Press, but I don't think your viewers know much about you, or probably they do. But to put us all on the same playing field, why don't you give us a brief overview of how you evolved as a writer?
Okay, actually, it goes back to when I was in, I think, grade 6 or 7, when I came in second in an essay writing contest at Holy Cross School, where I went to grade school. And I had no idea what the essay was about, but my parents and I got a free dinner. It was a Knights of Columbus one. So that's where it started. A bit of poetry written in high school. And then it proceeded from there to some short stories, but I wasn't having much luck with that. So I worked as a secretary in another incarnation. And so at nights, I went to night school at Ryerson. I took writing courses at Ryerson and at Seneca College in both in the journalism end and in the fiction end. And when my then husband and I moved to Aurora in 1975, I took a course, or a workshop rather, at the Seneca College in King Campus, and everybody in that class got a job doing something, or whether freelance or full-time, in the writing area. And mine was, I started freelancing in Bradford, Ontario. I like to say I sort of start my way up there and work my way south. And I wrote articles for a magazine, or it was in print, but we called it a magazine. It was like newsprint, called Topic. And I did that for a few years. And then I went a little further south to Newmarket for the Newmarket Era. And it was before it joined with the Banner. And I wrote a column on what the community groups were doing for them. And then I started doing the same thing at the Aurora Banner in Aurora because they paid more. But I got more experience working at the Aurora Banner. This is freelance. I say working there. I only went into the office to bring my copy in. Yes, folks, in those days, you didn't email it in or send it in any other way. You took the darn thing in print. And so I also did some articles. Profiles was my specialty on interesting people in the area. I covered plays with the local community, I guess you'd call it the community theater. And they had a workshop on makeup. And they made me the guinea pig, because I was covering it. They made me the guinea pig for the person being made up. I was made up as a witch. It appeared on the first page of the next banner, and I was furious. So anyway, after that, I started out at the Toronto Star in an old section. Some of you might remember this section. It died of, maybe 20 years ago. It was called North York and York Region. I covered a lot of the York Region part. I did mostly profiles of people and organized or community groups. And then and somewhere in there after that, I moved back to Toronto in the late 1990s, and I freelanced for the Globe and Mail. I did some short stories for them. And Robert Fulton's daughter was one of my editors there at one particular time. And I also freelance for the Toronto Live and some other papers, some smaller health papers, some online things like cbc.ca. And then I guess about maybe 2003, I started getting interested in this memoir business. I went and visited some family members in 2004 and got a lot of information from cousins who were very knowledgeable, and they introduced me to other people. I had probably met some of them as a child, and I was very fortunate that one of my uncles was still living up there, and I was able to talk to him. It was very interesting. And I also, the following year, that was in 2003. In 2004, I also met a couple of other cousins there. I used to go what I used to call tombstone tours. We go and look up the relatives in outside of, some of them were actually outside of Waterloo, and some of them were outside of Malmö, where my mother was born. And we find our tombstones of ancestors. So a lot of that was interesting to gather all the information. And I did do one version of it, which Shane had a look at in 2007. We did a trade. I looked at some of his short stories and gave my feedback on it. And he gave feedback on my memoir. And he said, you have two things going on in this. You have personal history, you have social history, or history of the time, social history, and you have your story. You're going to have to choose what to do. So I chose to do my story, and I worked in some of the social history. Like my dad worked for the railway. He was a timekeeper. So I have a chapter in there, riding the rails with Daddy. So get some of the background woven in. It doesn't stick out like a history lesson, and in there for that. So things like that get in there. And so I put it aside, though, because I was still working as a freelance journalist, was teaching some writing workshops, and I was also had started working as a freelance editor. And also before that, I worked full-time for a bit with Canada Law Book as a proofreader. So it was busy. But I still was interested in the short stories, or not the short stories, short stories and fiction, but I was still interested in the memoir, and I would keep coming back to it. You realize this is about 18 years we're talking about here, sort of an off and on thing, but I came back to it, and here it is. And that's what I'm doing. And I'm still writing the Beyond Mystery series, by the way.
Okay, well, I know that mysteries are your forte. You published 3 with us, and you have another in the oven, I'm told. I'd like to see that. And yet you chose to write a memoir. And I'm looking at some of the questions that are now pouring in from the readers, and they all seem to be on the same kind of theme: is why did you choose a memoir? Why was it so important to write a memoir? And what was the process like? And how long did it take you? Now, I'm pretty sure you mentioned 18 years, but I don't think it was 18 years of pure writing. You stopped and started many times.
Mhm.
But just talk about the process that you went through to try and unearth the research material, interview people, and make sure that, you didn't harm anybody, because, you're talking about real people here. Just take us through that process again.
Okay, well, I'm not going to go into detail about what it was about, but the original memoir, the one I finished in 2007, was completely different than this one. It wasn't, that's the one that Shane looked at. It was completely different. And so what I did with that was I tore it apart. I took at least half of it out. I looked to see what of the rest I could use, because I was going to do my personal story. I figured that was more important. I guess, not that my life was, that overly different. Well, maybe it was different, but I guess I wanted to get some of this stuff about what happened as I was growing up, how, my dad with his cancer, and what it was like with the school. And I got bullied by two bullies, a nun and one of my best friends. So, all that. I guess I wanted to write about that. And also I wanted to write about some of the foibles or the eccentricities of some of my family. But what I decided to do when I was writing this, I decided I was not going to use people's real names except for myself and my parents. And I believe I used the first name of my grandfather, that not his, his name is Charlie for Charles. So I used Charlie, but outside of that, I didn't. And that was out of respect for my family, and I use things like my godfather and my godmother. So there'd be, those terms that were used. And I think, I presented the way that I saw them, and I tried to be respectful in what I was saying. And, but a lot of humor came out in it, but mostly from a self appreciation or part on my side, but especially in the school with the bully, with the two bullies, and even with some of the other things too, with some of my cousins. But so that was the another version, and there were several versions. I decided to make it an extensive thing, so I went beyond what this one was. This one goes from age 4 to age 22, because my mother died when I was 22. That's why the age is 22. But I also added some other things on, and I had this big, humongous thing, which I sent to an agent. This was before Blue Denim Press existed, a couple of years before. And the agent was interested, but she said, it's too long, cut it back. So then I started working on this one that's finally been published, but it was slightly different before. It didn't really have too much of a focus. But Shane said, well, you should try and focus on your dad's cancer, because that keeps popping up in there. So that was what I did. But I also dealt with a lot of the aloneness, being an only child, elderly parents, and, what it was like to deal with stuff when you didn't have any siblings. And so finally, I got the darn thing finished this year.
Yeah, no, I'm reading this book. I saw several conflicts emerge. There was the bullying, as you mentioned, from several sources. There was the illness that keeps haunting you, not your illness, but your parents and the people around you. There was the alienation that comes from that. You're trying to be positive, you're trying to be upbeat about this, and trying to be a child and a teenager, and then all these people are falling sick around you, and you're kind of feeling lonely when everybody else is in good shape and all your friends are having a good time, but not you. And then finally being alone, right? You're an only child, and now you're going to be even lonelier than that. So you have all these conflicts going through. What did you particularly want to emphasize through all these conflicts? Which conflict was the most important for you?
I think the aloneness, because being an only child, and I think all the other things would stem from that, in the sense that how did a person or a child who was an only child deal with these things that kept happening? I mean, some people have some of the other things happen to in other people's families, that one of the parents gets ill. Maybe not cancer, maybe it's something else. Children are still bullied today, maybe even worse with the internet. But I think the core thing is the aloneness, and how that factored in with what was going on, and how it helped me either deal with it or not deal with it. And what I did I retreat? I didn't really embrace much, but did I go ahead and charge right in there, or what did I do? Because I was a very shy person back then, not as mouthy like I am now, folks. But, so I think the aloneness was definitely it.
Good. All right. Let's switch gears here for a little bit and talk about another factor in this book, which is the rural versus the urban pull in your family.
Mhm.
I know this very much because I used to live in Toronto and now I'm in the country, and I can see that they're two different worlds. And in your case, you had it in your life. Your mother was from a rural community and your dad was an urbanite, and you had both these forces in you. How did you reconcile these two halves of yourself while you were growing up?
I'm not sure if I actually reconciled. I just, accept that. I guess that's something I did accept because every summer, my dad, we were working for the railway. We traveled by train to visit the rural relatives, and those were the days when trains did go beyond Stratford and London, Ontario, and so we would take all sorts of trains to get there. And then once we were there, anywhere we went by car because my uncles and my godmother all drove. My parents didn't have a car. I don't know if they ever did know how to drive, but so we didn't go by car up there. Why not? We have free train rides, jeepers. But anyway, we so it was quieter up there, but you still had you would have conflicts in the family. I sort of got kind of not entangled, but got not even got used to sort of mixed with different people who had different eccentric character qualities. I'm going to mention one. I have an aunt who she was older than my mother, and she was a bit of a little eccentric. She'd wear these old flower dresses and she'd wear a straw hat, and she had short hair down to here, just sort of hanging, and no bangs. And she would smile, with yellow teeth. But she would rant on and on about fluoridation in Toronto, how bad it was. We didn't have it yet, but it was coming, and a few other things. And my grandfather, who I was really close to up there, that grandfather I was, and he taught me how to play crokinole. And that was funny in a way. That's in the book, by the way. And so is a bit about the other aunt. So it was just, and then it was just the relatives that they were just, when I'm looking back, it was just a difference in them, but the similarities. And I just accepted it when I was there. I liked it when I went up there. Now in Toronto, there was one family mainly that was here and another aunt. My dad being quite a bit older, a lot of his siblings had children that were closer to my age. So they were, or not close to age. Yeah, they were closer to my age. Their children, some of them were closer to the age of somebody who would be my aunt and uncle rather than the actual aunts and uncles. But there was one family that had 3 daughters, and one of them, the youngest one, and I were about the same age. So we hung around somewhat, when we were younger. I'd be up there or she'd be down at my place, not on a regular basis, but sometimes. And then when in a teens, you could go off on your own after that. But we did go there sometimes for Christmas. And I really liked my aunt. She was shorter than me. That's not why I really liked her, but she had this saying that she would reach up for something from the cupboard and say something, well, I don't know why the good Lord made me so short. And she had a very gravelly voice, what I just loved. I think my mother thought she was sort of, what's the word, snobbish, but I think she was maybe a little bit jealous, country bumpkin and so on, and city whatever. But that didn't bother me. But her husband, and he wasn't the blood relative, by the way, he was tall, like she was 4'11". He was about 6'2", 6'3", big. I think I was scared of the guy. And he was, to put it nicely, he was kind of blunt. He could be a bit sarcastic. And I'm going to end this little tirade here with a little short scenario. When after the reception, after my dad's funeral, we had some of the relatives, both sides of the family, over for sandwiches, and I think there was beer passed around. I didn't have it. I was 16 then, so I wasn't drinking beer. Back in those days, well, some kids did, I guess. But anyway, my job was to pass around the food. So I'm going around passing the sandwiches. My uncle, who I call Uncle Monty in the book, is sitting there, and beside him is the aunt I just described before, the eccentric one from my rural. So we have urban and rural together. And I'm standing with his sandwiches. He looks at me. Well, are you going to give me any sandwiches or not? And I sort of looked at him. He said, do you have any beef? He says, well, you should have with all the farm people here. And so he wanted 3 beef sandwiches. And, I felt like throwing the plate of sandwiches at him because here's my other aunt sitting right beside him. But anyway, I go over to her. Oh, she doesn't want any beef. She says, do you have any egg sandwiches? So, okay. But so that sort of shows somewhat of the difference and how it affected me.
Now, that's very interesting. You must have had an interesting time with these two worlds that you had to navigate. Let's talk a little bit about the only child syndrome, which I'm sure you were blessed with. I'm not sure if there's a blessing or a curse. Normally, the only child gets everything, right? But in your case, you lose everything, and you still have to, keep up and face the world. What was it like?
Well, before, when my parents were both still living, I, of course, wished I had siblings. I had to kind of stand up for myself, and I wasn't good at that. So that sort of didn't go over too well. But my parents did, and the next thing I read will give a little bit of information about that. My parents did try to help me. When things went haywire, when I was having problems, they had different ways of doing it. But and also, as far as an only child, well, remember, this was the 50s and early 60s. So we had the baby boom after the war was still going on, at least in the 50s. So most of my friends and relatives, they had a lot of siblings. I think from 3, that 3 is not a lot in a family for kids, but it started with about 3 and up a lot. So there were 2 friends, one classmate and one girlfriend that I hung around with outside of school. We didn't go to the same school. Both, they were only children, and they're the only ones I knew of that didn't have at least 1 or 2 siblings. So it was a little difficult doing that. But after, my dad died, there was just mom and I, but that was fine. And she got sick afterwards. And we were expecting my dad to die because he had a couple of bouts with the cancer, or 3 bouts actually, before he died. So it was it was sad losing him and everything, of course. But I think it hit me harder with my mother because it was unexpected. And I didn't think she was that ill. I mean, I'm embarrassed and ashamed the way that I acted, but I didn't know any better. I was 22 at the time, and we were sharing an apartment, and I woke up Saturday morning and she hadn't gotten up yet. So I went to check on her, and she was out cold, but I thought she was faking it, but she wasn't. So I did call the doctor, but in those days, no 911, and things were quite different then. So the doctor did come anyway later on, and he figured she had a stroke. So he called an ambulance, and off to the hospital we went. But she never came out of the coma despite surgery. And I think what really upsets me was when she died. One of my mother's close friends phoned me at work. I was working for the police department then as a clerk, phoned me and said, I just called the hospital. Your mother doesn't look like she's going to make it much longer. And this happened when my husband died. She said, I think you should go down there. So I got a police cadet to drive me to St. Mike's Hospital. And my mom had just died. And I didn't know this. I walked by her room. The bed is all cleared, and it's just a mattress there with the mattress cover on. It's just empty. I walked by the nurse's station, and I heard the nurses saying, "Oh, better call the doctor, or the daughter rather." And so that really upset me. And they put me in a room with a priest, and he asked me if I had any problems or anything I want to discuss. Of course, remember, I was scared to catch Sharon then. I was shy, so I didn't say anything. Now I would have just been all over all this stuff at the hospital. How dare they not call me when things were getting worse? I had to find it out from one of my mother's friends. If she hadn't have called me, I wouldn't have found out until even later. So that upset me. But my godmother stepped in, and she took me in under her wing a lot. I stayed with her for a few days after Mom's funeral, and then she sort of helped out an awful lot when when I had my son was born. She stayed with me. She was really good. She was, I really appreciated what she did. So I did have family, cousins and uncles and aunts, but not, no brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Sharon. That's very moving because we tend to dump on our medical facilities and so on today, but we don't realize how far we've come from 30 years ago, when things were much worse. And I think what moved me in the book was the grace and the humor in which you overcame all those really bad situations. And I think that's the lesson in the book, is that no matter what hits you, keep your sense of humor. That's important. Now, having said that, who should read this book and why?
Okay, obviously people around my age, men and women, because they may want to go back to the 50s and 60s, and especially if they were in Toronto at the time, or even if they're not, even if they weren't born in Toronto. And like when I was growing up, a lot of the immigrants were Italian. Some of them were they were born in Toronto, but their parents weren't. But I remember some Italians that were maybe a little bit older than me, maybe about 11, 12, 13, who came to Holy Cross when I was in grade 5. And they might, because they didn't have their whole life there. Even younger people, maybe their parents were born there, or Toronto's a bigger city now and more well-known. People might, that are into the history part of it and what it was like growing up then, what it was like living then. People who have cancer in their lives, like my parents didn't tell me my dad had cancer. I found out, well, I'm not going to tell you how, you have to read the book to find out, but they didn't tell me. And so, they lied to me. So, that was kind of a big blow. So I think other people that might be interested would be, maybe some younger people that I was just interested in what it was like then. Also, the railway aspect. There's a lot of railway people who like not just the small railways, whatever you call but the motor runs, the small ones. I can't remember what you call them, but there's people that are used to work for the railways, or now work for the railways, and there are railway groups of retired railway employees, because somebody I hired as a researcher found somebody from there so I could find out what the heck my father did as a timekeeper. But anyway, so they might be interested in that, because the railway gets in part of it. Maybe people with their families have had cancer, or somebody in the family has cancer. What it was like in those days as compared to now. There's such a big change now. The list could go on and on. People who like reading memoirs, people who write memoirs, maybe people who've taken memoir writing workshops from me or from other people, they might be interested. Certainly, if you want to write a memoir, you always should read what has come before you, to see one way in which it is done.
Good, Sharon. Thank you. Now, I give you two choices. You can either read now, or I can go on with questions that have come in from the audience. What would you prefer?
I think the questions.
Okay, so let's go with the questions from the audience. So now, just so that the audience knows, I have quite a list here. I'm not going to ask all of them, because we'll probably go till 9 o'clock, but I will ask some of the ones that didn't get addressed in my interview section. And the ones that we are not able to answer today, we're going to go back into the Facebook feed, and we will type in the answers. Sharon will be happy to answer them. If they are for me, then I'll answer them, but we'll answer all the questions that have been raised on the feed. So the first one that I'm going to ask you is, or that came in through the feed, was it hard to be totally honest? Were you ever tempted to disguise the truth?
I guess you mean when writing the memoir. Well, I didn't use the real names, but that's not too uncommon. I don't know if you have heard of Catherine Gildner, who wrote Too Close to the Falls, and then she wrote 2 sequels to it. Too Close to the Falls, I recommend reading that one. It was written in 1999, but it's hilarious. She was all sorts of mischief. She grew up in the States, and in New York State. So it's really good. But anyway, what she did with, not that book, but with the second one, which is a little bit more serious, because it's, I think when she's in her teens and goes into university, because there's something serious happens, and I'm not going to tell you what, she does use some pseudonyms. But what I do is I put a disclaimer at the front about this. I'm upfront about this. So being honest about what's happening in there. No, I didn't mind doing that. Let's put it this way: I'm too old to care about stuff like that coming out. A lot of it got edited out for space. Shane edited some out, and I edited some out myself, because It was just getting too long. We don't want, a big, thick War and Peace type memoir. This is under 200 pages. So I think that answers that question.
Okay, good. Thank you. Here's another one. What was the hardest part of writing the memoir?
Finishing it.
All right, that's fairly quick. That's easy. Let's get on to the next one. The next one is, should we fictionalize and change the names to be completely honest?
I think it's like a 50-50 thing. Depending on what you're gonna like. All right, one author who's a celebrity, I won't mention her name, she does use real names, but she went around and had everybody read it to make sure they agreed with everything in the book. Now, you don't do that with a memoir, and it's your memoir. I thought that the stories, what happened, was important. So were the people. But even if I called somebody Teresa or Marlene or whatever their real name was, it didn't really change the fact that they were, in my family one way or the other, or they were friends, or they were bullies. The bully, by the way, is called the bully all the way through. I don't even give her a name. The nun, I've changed the name. The nun, by the way, she left. I found out from somebody else that I grew up with. She left the convent, got married, had a bunch of kids, left her marriage and died. I don't know how close together all that was. So she, unless her ghost is going to come back and haunt me, but I did change her name.
Oh, that's very good. That's hilarious. Now, here's another interesting question, and perhaps I might add to this after you've given the answer. How can a non-celebrity market a memoir?
Well, it's a little difficult now with the COVID business because everything is online. But what I used to do with the Beyond books and what mystery books and what could be done with a memoir in normal times is you would get gigs at libraries, or you would go to get gigs at a pub that does have authors there, maybe it with another writing group, and you maybe teach a workshop and you promote your book through that, and you do readings, or you get on a panel with other authors, and there's that way. With the with that, and what you do now is a lot of social media. I have 2 blogs, and so haven't been up to date with it. I did have a bit about the launch and the memoir. There will be more going in there. One of them is called Only Child Writes, and what I did with that while I was writing the memoir, and this one has been going on off and on for, I guess, about 9 years or so, 9 or 10 years. And I would start with something from the memoir that I was working on, or something back in my past, and then I would bring it to something going on in the present, and then I would mention the memoir, and I put it at the bottom of the blog. I have a web page with a whole page on it, and you just sort of do it through Facebook and a lot of other social media things. You have a book launch like we're doing now. There will be other things virtually I will do in the new year. I also belong to a writers group called the East End Writers Group, so I've promoted it that way too. So there's lots of ways to do it.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, because I'm also part of the marketing engine of Sharon's book. What the pandemic has done for us on the positive side is opened us to tools like Zoom and Facebook Live and YouTube and so on, where we can come out here and spread the word far and wide. In the past, we used to meet in restaurants and theaters and art galleries and do book launches to private audiences, and we would probably hit 50 or 60 people on a good day. And now we can hit 1,000 people in a couple of days, because this event is going to be recorded. It's going to be broadcast on different channels and different media, and people will get to see it. It's not going deep, but it's going broad. And when hopefully the pandemic is over, we can do both. We can go broad with events like this, and we can continue to go deep with our in-person meetings and so on. So there has been some good that has come out of this. Although right now it's tough for authors to sell their books, because, as I mentioned earlier, it's curbside pickup, or it's online ordering through Amazon, or ebook ordering. That's the order of the day right now. I got one more question for you, Sharon, then I think we have to move on in the interest of time. Uh, and the question here was, did your memoir evolve over time?
It did, yes, what I would put in it. Um, but I mean, it was all things that happened in the past, but I would think over time what to put in. Oh no, not everything all at once, definitely not.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, all of those folks who asked the questions, and we will get back to the others if we hadn't addressed them with comments back in the Facebook feed. But now we're going to get on to asking Sharon to read again a shorter section from her memoir.
Okay. Okay, I hinted at that I was going to read something about my parents and trying to, well, this isn't exactly protecting me, but it sort of comes under that. Winter and summer, Daddy steered me through the obstacles of childhood play. Maybe his age made him do it. Perhaps he was just a doting dad. He was the king, and if he could help it, no one and nothing would ever hurt me. Mom, on the other hand, took a more practical, albeit sometimes skewed approach. Maybe it was their differing backgrounds, country mouse, mom, and city mouse, daddy, colliding. Mom was born on a farm near Mildmay, Ontario, and didn't move to Toronto until obtaining secretarial work there in her 20s. Daddy was French Canadian and was born in Montreal. The Langevin family moved to Toronto when my father was a child. The two did collaborate once. When my 6th birthday rolled around, that's when they decided I needed to learn to ice skate. As my oddball elderly parents, they had to put their own personal twist on the teaching process. So Daddy constructed the ice rink and Mommy got me moving on it, after a fashion. Daddy turns on the hose and outpours cold water. Overnight it freezes on the dormant grass in the backyard. I never think how the water passes through the hose. Wouldn't it be frozen? Does Daddy put his ear to the lime green radio and listen to the weather reports to see when the daytime temperatures hovers around freezing, that's 32 degrees Fahrenheit back then, or just below? When night falls, so does the temperature, and in the morning, magic, instant skating rink in the backyard. Then Daddy turns it over to Mom. Like a dance instructor trying to teach steps to a nervous wannabe, she grabs my hands and tries to set me in motion. Come on, Sharon, just slide your feet, one foot in front of the other. My feet, tucked tightly into new white figure skates, scrape and totter along the ice, and my fingers dig into her hands, her mittens, no protection for the hard, petrified squeeze I give her. I do not want to fall. I might break a leg. I'm terrified of losing control. So carry on, clinging to Mom as she steps backwards, sometimes in her rubber boots and sometimes in an old pair of Daddy's black hockey skates. I follow forward like a drunken clown. 2 winters of this private slide and lurch pass by. Then my 8th birthday arrives. You're ready for Dieppe Park, Mom says. The big time. Dieppe Park has 2 enclosed hockey rinks and 1 large pleasure skating rink. Mom and I walk down Greenwood and along Carsburn Avenue. When we arrive, Mom takes me into the cold changing room. She assists me as I shiver into extra socks and the skates. Then she laces them up. Is this tight enough? She asks. Better make it tighter. She pulls on the laces until I think my ankles will stay straighter than a lamppost. Then she hands me the skating guards, which I grab with my left hand. My right hand takes hers, and I push my bum forward. I try to imagine I'm standing, but it seems strange and impossible. But I get up. It feels as if I'm balancing on stilts the width of a sliver and the weight of a brick. This is not the way I want to see the world, and I imagine that the world's eyes are looking at me as Mom walks, and I teeter out the door into colder cold. When we arrive near the ice, my left ankle starts to wobble. Sit down here and I'll fix it, she points to the bench. I grip the seat, and like Frankenstein's monster, plop down. Mom unlaces the offending skate, purses her lips, grunts, and yanks on the laces. If my lungs were in my ankle, I would suffocate. She reaches the top of the skate and ties the laces into a bow, followed by a knot. Then she turns me loose.
Wow, you had an interesting lesson there. I remember when I learned to skate, I was 35 years old. I'd come in from the tropics. I fell on my bum about 40 times, I think. But that's another story. So Sharon, thank you for the readings and thank you for answering the questions honestly. Now we have the time for picking the winners, and I'll tell you how I went. This is, you know, no secret. I just took my smartphone. I looked at all the comments because I figured everyone qualified to enter the draw, and I just spun it up and down, and I put my finger. Then I spun it up and down again. I put my finger again, and I spun it up a third time and put my finger. So I picked 3 winners, and the winners are Sheila Tucker, Mandy Robinson, and Lorna Poplack. So I'll read those names again: Sheila Tucker, Mandy Robinson, and Lorna Poplack. Now, what you need to do for us is either through the Facebook Messenger or email. You can send either Sharon or myself. I'm at info@bluedenimpress.com. Sharon's at her email address. Send either Sharon or myself your mailing address, so we can mail you the books. There's 3 copies of The Enemies Within Us will be mailed out within the week. So thank you for participating. Now, before we go, there's something else. I mentioned at the beginning that this book is on sale, and I'm going to repeat it again. And if I don't do it well enough, Sharon, I think you should help me out. The book is retailing right now for $24, but it's on special for the next 5 days at the Danforth Book City at 348 Danforth Avenue, just west of Chester, on the north side of Danforth, and is part of the Carrot Common. So the book is on sale from the 25th of November to the 29th of November. But because there are these restrictions of association in Toronto, you could phone the Book City and order the book online or on the phone, pay with your credit card, and pick the book up during their business hours, which is, I think, most of the week. That's one, and I hope you would do that because that really helps Sharon sell her books during this really, really difficult time when book launches are pretty much only virtual. I also have the book in ebook format. It's selling for $2.99 Canadian on the Kobo site. So if you have the EPUB application, you can use Kobo. If you're an Amazon Kindle fan, it's on Amazon Kindle for $2.99 US. That's also on special for the next 5 days. So whichever your preference is, ebook or tree book, as I call it, please go ahead and order the book. Have I covered it all, Sharon, or do you want to say something else?
I want to say something else. I'm going to hold the book up again. You will get the 3 of you who have won a copy, you will get it signed. And it will be mailed out to you. And my email for the Lorna and Sheila have my email, but I don't think Mandy does. It's words, WORDS @samcraw.com. I'm going to spell that. WORDS @SAMCRAW.com with your information, or you can email it to Shane at the info@bluedenimpress.com. But it's me that'll be sending the books out by mail. And so you should get it whenever the post office decides to deliver them. I'll get them out this week anyway, and I will sign them. Now for the other one, those of you who wish to purchase one at Danforth Book City, please phone them, because online it's through one of the other book cities, the beach one, and they don't have copies of the book. It's only at the Danforth one right now. And if you phone, and you can order as many copies as you like, they will, you pay with your Visa, your MasterCard, and they will tell you about picking it up. You don't have to make an appointment. Just go, they'll tell you the business hours. And when you do go to pick it up, you just call them on your cell when you're outside the door, and, wear a mask, please. And one of them will then come to the door to do the social distancing, step back. And this is the Danforth entrance you go to. And one of the staff will come out and hand you the book. It's already paid for. And as long as you phone within those 5 days, it doesn't matter if you pick it up after. It's those 5 days, the 25th to 29th, where it's $20. And I think that's really enough of that for me.
Okay, well, thank you, Sharon, for elaborating on that. Now, just another quick thing. We will be doing more of these virtual book launches and readings in the coming weeks. In fact, we have another one lined up for December 10th, I believe. An invitation and an event will be posted shortly. It's Liz Torley's The Way Things Fall, another superb book that I had the privilege of editing and working with Liz on. And so stay tuned for that. We'll be sending that invitation out shortly. And then there'll be others, because this is, I think, the way we're going to do it. We're going to go broad, we're going to broadcast ourselves, and we're going to make sure that people know who we are and what we write. So Sharon, you may want to just say goodbye to everybody, because we're coming to the end of the show now, and we're going to be signing off shortly.
Okay, I just want to say, to add to what Shane said, that there will be some more, probably Blue Denim Press, I don't know where it's sponsored or affiliate, start or hosting, where some of us from Blue Denim Press will probably be doing some things virtually via Zoom in the new year. After Christmas, we don't know what Christmas is going to be like this year, but we will be doing some things in the new year. So to add, that goes back to the question about, how do you promote your book? That would be a new way to try and do it in these pandemic times. So, but I want to thank you all for coming. Even though I can't see you, I don't know who three of you are anyway. And I know my son's out there somewhere and his partner, Junie. So I'm glad you all came, and I hope you enjoyed it. We didn't bore you or anything. And as Shane said, those whose questions were not answered will get done on Facebook at some point in time. So thank you. And I was going to say have a safe journey home, but you probably just have to get off your butt. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. And stay well, and good night.